The first scream did not come from the cockpit. It came from the aisle. Boots thundered down the narrow passage as three armed men burst forward, shouting in a language no one fully understood. Rifles swung violently, muzzles cutting across faces, like accusations. A drink cart slammed into a seat and tipped over, scattering cups across the floor. A woman screamed. Someone prayed out loud. The aircraft, steady only moments before, suddenly felt too small to breathe in. Victor Kovac stopped in the center of the cabin and grabbed the nearest flight attendant by the arm. Mara Ellison did not resist. He forced her down between the seats, pressing her shoulder until her knees hit the carpet. His voice was calm, almost bored. "This is what happens," he said, "to anyone who forgets their place." Passengers stared in frozen silence. Some looked away, ashamed. Others felt a quiet, terrible relief that it was not them. Mara kept her eyes down. Her hands rested loosely on her thighs. She looked small, ordinary, broken. Only one man noticed something was wrong. Cole Barrett watched how she settled her weight, how her breathing slowed instead of spiking, how her balance stayed perfect even as the plane shuddered lightly through turbulence. Fear filled the cabin. Judgment hung thick in the air. Mara Ellison was in her early 40s, the kind of woman people looked past instead of at. Her hair was pinned tight, her navy uniform pressed smooth, her face calm in the practiced way that made strangers feel safe without demanding attention. She had flown this route so many times she could picture the cabin with her eyes closed, the loose seatbelt on the toddler in row 10, the man who always asked for 2 sugars, the nervous first-time flyer gripping the armrests like a lifeline. In her world, comfort came from routine. Routine came from doing small things correctly. To the passengers she was served as a moving uniform, a polite voice that meant coffee, blankets, and rules about tray tables. Even now, as fear spread through the cabin like smoke, most people still saw her as harmless. That was why Victor Kovac chose her. He didn't just want control of the plane. He wanted control of the story inside the cabin, and humiliating a flight attendant was the fastest way to teach 200 people to obey. Mara stayed on her knees until he moved away. When she stood, she did it slowly, as if drained of strength. She began moving down the aisle, collecting spilled cups and straightening what she could. It gave her hands something to do. It also gave her time. Angles, distances, faces. Senator Paul Whitmore sat near the front, his shoulders stiff with anger. He couldn't use. When Mara paused to comfort a trembling woman, he leaned in and whispered that she needed to do something useful, that the crew had a responsibility, that someone should talk to the men and fix this. The words sounded brave. Underneath, they were contempt. Mara did not argue. She gave him a small nod and moved on. Behind her, Linda Moore watched closely. Linda was the senior attendant, sharp-eyed, mid-50s, the kind of woman who could read a cabin like a weather map. She had trained new hires for years and learned that panic always left fingerprints. Mara was leaving none. The hijackers paced the aisle, taking phones, barking orders. The cabin lights felt too bright. The low hum of the engines felt louder. As if the aircraft itself was listening, Mara moved with measured steps. Her shoulders stayed level. Her breathing stayed slow. Her eyes did not drift like frightened eyes. They tracked. Cole Barrett hadn't wanted the aisle seat, but now it gave him a clear view of everything that mattered. 18 years in the Air Force didn't leave a man politely. It stayed in habits that never died. Watching hands, measuring spacing, reading movement. He saw Mara count the men without moving her lips. He saw her glance toward the cockpit door, then the emergency phone, then the bulkhead. Most people stared at the weapons. Mara watched timing. When turbulence shook the aircraft, passengers gasped. A child whimpered. Mara adjusted her stance before the motion fully arrived. A small shift of weight, the kind of reflex Cole had seen in pilots and flight crews. Linda noticed it too. When their eyes met briefly, what Linda saw wasn't panic. It was calculation. Mara knelt beside an older man struggling to breathe and guided him through slow breaths. She checked his pulse like reading a gauge and moved on without waiting for thanks. It wasn't coldness, it was discipline. Phones were collected next. When a teenage boy tried to hide his phone, Novak smashed it against the armrest until the glass shattered. The crack felt like a warning shot. Mara returned with water bottles. Each stop gave her information. Victor favored his right side. Novak was reckless. Varga checked exits like a technician. Her eyes flicked once toward the overhead speaker, not in fear, but as if listening for radio traffic. Cole felt his throat tighten. He recognized that look. Linda quietly asked if Mara was okay. Mara nodded and whispered to keep people seated in the aisle clear. Linda didn't know why, but the certainty in Mara's voice made her obey. The takeover settled into a rhythm, quiet, then sudden threats. Fear did the shouting now. Victor pointed to a pregnant woman mid-cabin, Emily Carter. Her hands were folded protectively over her belly. Her young son pressed against her side. Victor ordered Novak to bring her. Emily shook her head. Novak yanked her to her feet. The boy cried out and was shoved back into his seat, his head striking the headrest. The cabin inhaled as one. Mara stepped into the aisle, palms open. tick me instead, she said softly. She's pregnant. Novak laughed and tightened his grip. Mara moved closer, inside the space where his weapon couldn't swing freely. She stumbled as the plane hit a small bump, her elbow brushing his wrist. It looked accidental. His grip loosened for half a second. Mara guided Emily back into a seat. No fight, no drama. Emily collapsed, clutching her son. Mara stepped back, hands raised, invisible again. Novak's smile vanished. Victor's eyes sharpened. If you try that again, Victor said calmly, she dies first. Mara nodded. Inside, something hardened. Whispers spread. A man near the back began planning under his breath. Rush them. Grab the gun. Be a hero. Mara saw it instantly. She knew how that story ended. The man stood. 2 others followed. For a heartbeat, hope surged. Then Victor fired into the ceiling. The shot shattered the moment. Screams erupted. Novak slammed one man into a seat. Varga restrained another with terrifying efficiency. Victor warned them calmly. Fear did the rest. The cabin fell quiet again. Not hopeful. Helpless. Mara watched everything. Reaction times. Positions. Who panicked. Who stayed disciplined. She was mapping the problem like a pilot mapping. Where the dud Novak dragged her into the galley. He pinned her against the counter, mocking her bravery. Mara let herself look weak. Let her breathing shake. The plane rolled slightly. Novak shifted his weight. That was the opening. Mara moved fast and silent. She redirected his wrist and elbow, stepped through his balance, and drove pressure beneath his jaw. He collapsed without a sound. She eased him to the floor. Thomas Varga entered with his weapon raised. He adjusted instantly. Mara raised her hands, backing up. When the plane jolted, she dropped low. The shot went wide. She surged forward, trapped. The rifle collapsed his stance, and finished it quickly and cleanly. Victor entered last. He took in the scene and smiled. Mara reached for a medical injector as he fired. Pain burned across her arm. She drove into him anyway and plunged the injector into his thigh. His strength strained in seconds. He collapsed, confused and furious. Mara restrained him and stepped back. She emerged into the cabin. Smoke lingered. Silence followed her. She walked straight to the cockpit inside. The first officer stared as she cut his restraints. The captain was unconscious but alive. Mara slid into the left seat and stabilized the aircraft. "Get me clearance," she said. She took the radio. Her voice was precise, controlled. "Captain Mara Ellison," she said evenly. "Former Air Force." The words settled into the cockpit. She guided the aircraft down with steady hands. Emergency vehicles lined the runway. The landing was firm but controlled. When the plane stopped, no one moved at first. Then instructions came. Calm, clear. Passengers exited slowly. Stunned. Mara exited last. A general waited at the bottom of the stairs and raised a sharp salute. Mara returned it without hesitation. No words were needed. The passengers understood the woman they dismissed had carried discipline instead of fear. And when everything collapsed, that discipline brought them home.